Hey guys, this is Cade Lamb with Fear Not Do Right, and this is the Fear Not Do Right podcast. Today I am here with, what are you, notorious, infamous,
legendary?
I thought you were about
to not say my name right. Do you know how to say my last name?
Zegers.
Okay.
How would I not know?
I don't know.
How to say
I was
it
hoping
right?
to kind of catch you.
Do people say it wrong?
They say Zegers.
Zegers?
Yeah. And
No.
they always do. They start to hesitate when they're getting close to having to say the name.
No, I just need to know how to properly address you, like how in England, you know.
Oh,
they
no,
they
I'm
refer
just a
to people
regular
as
miss.
sirs and ladies.
Do you want me to get radical? The term Ms.,
Ms.
a Marxist socialist term, Cade, that was created in the late 1900s by the feminists to normalize the concept of this period between singledom and marriage. It was never really a thing. And so I like to be called Miss Morgan Zegers.
Well,
Not
as
Ms.
I understood it, it was you are a miss, and then you become a Mrs.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you go from a Mrs. to being not a Mrs., you just are a Ms.
Yeah, but then they started to normalize Miss or Ms. when you're young because feminism.
Interesting.
Fascinating, right?
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to stop.
So I'm Miss.
We're canceling Ms.
Yes.
All those.
That was the name of the feminist magazine, Ms.
Ms. Wow.
Yeah, the more you know.
The more. So you claim to be radicalized. How did that process start for you?
Well, that's the thing. I joke that it's, normalized to radicalize, but really it's just ideas that used to be normal a handful of years ago and natural, primal societal roles that I like to embrace. I think it's because our generation, maybe millennials and Gen Z at this point, we were sold this lie of what to seek out in life and what to look for and what to aim for. And we're realizing that it actually leads us to be quite empty and unfulfilled. And they are telling us to avoid all of the things that bring natural happiness, like faith, family, children, and service and community. So I just like to bring those things back. I think that that's what could really solve everything, because I think government isn't really the solution for all the problems that we face. This is really cultural. So,
Are you telling me that you don't think the government's doing a good job?
I don't. Cancel me.
So how did you come to this realization? Because I mean, you're from New York.
Yeah.
And New York, as we all know, is the leading edge in conservative policy and thought process.
Oh, for sure. We're basically like Florida.
Basically Florida, basically Arizona, where
Oh my
it's all a
gosh.
bunch of cowboys and Indians running around shooting at each other.
Cuomo, DeSantis, basically the same person.
Absolutely.
So I grew up in upstate New York. This is interesting. My dad, I always wonder, how did I become conservative? Because my parents never talked to me about politics, and we weren't a religious family. So I never went to church except to be baptized. And I started going to church alone in college, and that's how I got into that. But I always think back to, how did I become at least more conservative fiscally, or how did I start to not trust the government and think that individual freedom was more important than dependency on government? And I think it's because my dad is an auditor for military spending in the government. And so around the dinner table, those were the kind of stories that I was hearing when he came back from work every day. And he just retired. He was a colonel and served in Iraq and was on the scene of 9/11 on 9/12. And I don't know if you've seen my workshop videos, but there's a deer in the back, and he has an American hat construction hat on, American flag construction hat. And it's because when they were all going down on 9/12 to New York City, they stopped at a rest stop, and the construction workers were like, "Are you guys heading down there?" And they said yes, and they all gave their construction hats to my dad and his guys that were going down. And so that's what that hat is from. Isn't that cool?
That's super cool.
And so there's all those mementos in my house, but I grew up in upstate New York. Even though I'm in this patriotic conservative family, it's still a state where it's the highest state and local tax burden in the country. I don't know if California might be beating us now. It's one of the hardest states to raise a family, one of the hardest states to maintain or start a business, and we basically ranked the highest in all the worst categories. And so I struggled with not wanting to leave my family, but in COVID, it was the last straw for me. And I saw how they wanted to infringe on our lifestyles, stop our businesses, force things onto our children, tell us that our kids are resilient and that they don't need proper education or proper respect as they're coming of age in such a crucial time of development. And I saw that kind of disrespect and that mistreatment of the citizens. And I said, I can't raise my family here. So I had a speech in Texas, and I saw it. I drove around the community, and I had my speech, and I ended up canceling my flight back and I just got an apartment in Texas. And then I moved all my stuff down right after that. So I was waiting for a place where I felt comfortable and where I knew that I wanted to leave because it didn't match my values. But I just had to see the area before I made that big change. And once I saw Boerne, Texas, I was like, oh, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, you got a couple of projects where you're talking about normalizing the radicalization of normalization.
Normalize to radicalize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the first main project that you got into?
Oh, well,
you got a couple going on right now.
I do a few separate things. I love the flexibility that comes with being my own boss in that way. Like I'm not an employee at any organization or any company. I started a nonprofit, so this is the C3 stuff that I do. It's a tax-exempt nonprofit, so we take donations and we interview with those funds survivors from socialist and communist countries. So the show is called The Freedom Records. It's available at thefreedomrecords.com, and it's me asking people that experienced momentous moments in human history throughout the 20th century and early 21st century about how did those leaders that turned into dictators rise to power? What promises were they telling you? What policies were they enacting? Because a lot of them were actually democratically elected, and none of this stuff is taught in the school system right now. And so I want to fill that gap. I want to properly tell the history of socialism and communism and make sure that when young people hear those same promises in America today, they start to say, wait, this happened in Venezuela. This happened in the USSR. This happened in communist China. This reminds me of XYZ. And now a red flag will go off in their heads, hopefully after they start to see that kind of historical content. So I love that so much. It's my passion project. And then I have a business where I make wooden American flags. That's how I paid off my student loans, and now I just do it for fun with my dad. Basically, we just keep it going.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do you know Kenny from Golden Age Supply?
I don't.
He's really cool. He does handmade leather goods, and we partnered, and now we sell those leather goods through the shop as well. So it's
cool.
been fun to support his small business because he's got a great family, and they homeschool, and they're super awesome. But then that next thing that I do is with Turning Point here in Arizona. And we go through all the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, and it has been so nerdy and fun. Maybe you should come on the show if you ever want to, but we go through all the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, and those were basically the opinion essays written by the founders advocating for the ratification of the Constitution or against it, and then they released them into newspapers, hoping that the voters of America that were trusted to vote to ratify or not to ratify would be swayed one way or another. And so it was this great debate taking place in the public newspapers, and they trusted the people enough to be smart enough and care enough to learn and educate themselves and then make the proper vote. And I think that's a fantastic lesson for all of us. It was really one of the first instances as well of debating and then coming to an agreement. That's how we got the Bill of Rights. So I really love that project with Turning Point. And most recently I signed with Salem to do a 3-episode-a-week podcast called The Morgan Zegers Show, just commentating on current events from a young woman's perspective. So I really do think it's important, and I want to homeschool one day, so I consider the fact, like, okay, I don't have kids, but my little podcast where I talk about what's going on in the world for Salem, that could be like me homeschooling the citizenry. So I love it so much.
Well, that's how, so when I was actually homeschooled at a point for like 2 years. In middle school, I was just getting in too many fights at school.
Really?
Yeah. Surprising, right?
Yeah, actually.
Really?
Yeah, you're all sweet.
Well, you heard it here first, guys. If you want to take anyone's word for it,
I shouldn't have given you a compliment.
Take Morgan Zegers' word for it. But no, I was like 6th grade. I was getting a ton of fights at school and really disagreeing with my teachers because this was at the time when teachers just started to like have personalities in the classroom other than being a teacher. And my dad was not having it, and so he pulled me and my sister out of school, and he started homeschooling us. And we did a lot of like for math and stuff. I would do landscaping projects.
Oh, fun!
And then I would learn all the math of like, okay, square footage and laying sod and putting in sprinkler systems and stuff.
Yeah.
And for like the history side of things, at the time Glenn Beck was still on Fox News. And he had a show. He did a show every week called Founders Fridays. Oh. Where he would go through an expose of one of the founding fathers.
Oh, that's so fun.
And that's why I think it's interesting. Like you do the freedom papers, because John, especially in the context of being a young conservative in America, because that's exactly who Alexander Hamilton and John Jay were at the time. Correct?
They were all. A ton of the founders were in their 20s. And that's crazy.
And that was like Geez, Louise, I just
The
completely
founding
brained
or Declaration of Independence?
No.
Like
The Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers.
Okay, I was thinking of all the buzzwords of the
Yeah,
Revolutionary
Federalist
War.
Papers. Those were written. When did they start writing those?
So those were started in 1787, and for anybody who doesn't know, this is the thing. A lot of people don't know this even happened, but we had a first attempt at government called the Articles of Confederation, and it's a beautiful story because obviously we had trust issues after just fighting a revolutionary war against an oppressive colonist monarchy that was infringing on our human rights, is what we were accusing them of. And we fought a war against that, and then the trust issues that we had of giving a centralized power too much power to actually hurt us again in the future and create a second coming of a King George or something like that, we were really worried that that's what would be the case. And so they created the Articles of Confederation, which was basically just the states that existed at the time, the colonies. They were states that agreed to be a part of a league, and there was no ability to hold anybody accountable. And so it was basically like, hey, if we get invaded, everybody's going to promise to send troops and money so that we can get the ball rolling and protect our coordinated border. I mean, how do you expect them to actually just randomly send money whenever it's requested, or to actually send troops if an invasion happens?
You just hang a lamp. Right?
And so all the Federalist Papers, it's literally topic by topic. One whole paper is on, I can't remember the numbers, there's 85 of them. But one of them is saying, so if there's no way to hold each other accountable and there's no expectation of what somebody should contribute, basically the only way for us to hold a state accountable for not submitting money and troops when we're invaded is to invade them? Invade one of our own states because they didn't follow a rule, and then it's just a bunch of little civil wars. So it's fascinating to see. I mean, this is Hamilton, Madison, John Jay versus the Anti-Federalists, and they're going back and forth in all of these hypothetical scenarios that could happen. And today we hear a lot of people, Kate, you've talked about this with me before, I do not like when these microphone boys sit behind microphones and normalize and try and romanticize civil war or national divorce or any of this stuff, because if you read the Federalist Papers, they go through from Rome and Greece all the way up through the Netherlands and England and Germany, and all these different examples of what happens when you have fragile states next to each other like that, or what happens when you try and divide a country. It's never good. It's always dangerous, and that was the whole point of forming the Union, to protect citizens from domestic danger and from foreign danger. So our founders went through this. They had this debate, and now we are dismissing the fact that the Federalist and Anti-Federalist Papers even exist. So it's really important for us to go back to them.
Well, I think it's interesting how you brought up the microphone boys, because
now you're a microphone boy?
A little bit.
I'm kidding.
A little bit. Well,
joking. You have more life experience and military experience.
Well, that's the thing with those founding fathers, especially those writing the Federalist Papers, was they had already gone through the American Revolution.
Yeah.
They had, I can only assume that at some point they had to take up a rifle themselves and shoot at some English dudes.
Yeah.
I mean, who wouldn't love the opportunity to do that nowadays? Apparently what's interesting is the microphone boys that you talk about, all these little dweebs that put a shirt and tie on and grab a microphone, and they talk about, well, I wouldn't say they talk about, they more so regurgitate the, whatever they hear from whoever's at the top of their social hierarchy. But these guys, like you said, they're calling for civil wars and stuff. Dudes have never been punched in the face. You've never been in a fight, and you're out here saying, yes, war.
It's very destructive. And then the solutions that they claim would come from separation wouldn't happen for generations to come, at least. I mean, like, we would experience, and our children and our grandchildren would experience, absolute chaos and violence, the way most of human history has shown. The peace and stability, I know it seems crazy right now, like, oh, things are so bad here in America. But all of human history is violence, oppression, slavery in the sense of oppressing another group of people. I mean, the serfdom in Russia is horrific when you look at it. And what I love to look at is the differences. As Catherine the Great, a student of the Enlightenment in the 1700s, at the same time as our founding is happening and all this stuff is happening over in the West on the shores of America, she comes to power and she's like, I'm going to end serfdom in Russia. I'm a student of the Enlightenment. But serfdom, which was slavery of white people, enslaving white people and owning just by class. You were born into your class and you were property of somebody else. It had been in Russia from the time that they had existed in the beginning. And taking that away from their society would be insane. She failed to do so, and she even acknowledges, she's like, listen, these people hate me. The nobles are the only ones that have my back. She basically gave up on all of those young female dreams because she was young and she was in her 20s, and she's like, I'm going to save this country and make us different. And so when you look at what she was dealing with, trying to end that same practice over in her country, and then how we did it, our founders were really intentional. And I just filmed with Turning Point Federalist 42, I think. I might be wrong on this, but we just did an entire Federalist paper where James Madison attacks slavery. And he's like, obviously, I would like to end it immediately, but this is the best possible and practical solution for us to end it. It was a proposal to have the importation of slaves banned after 20 years of ratifying the Constitution. And reading that, an entire essay that he wrote saying this is disgusting behavior of treatment from one human to another human to do that. It's disgusting for us to allow it. The Europeans are the ones who are enslaving the Africans, and we are going to end this practice. It's fascinating to read it. You don't hear about that stuff at all. So understanding our history is truly vital, I would say, and it helps us fight back against the radicals today that are, what I believe, we are experiencing a cultural revolution the way that China had, where they're rewriting history. They're erasing our culture and what we used to be able to unite around. And it's important for us to understand the historical context so that we can fight back against the lies.
When do you think that cultural revolution, or we'll call it the culture war, because that's really what it is. I mean, it's not really a revolution yet.
Well, that's what they called it in China.
That's what they called it in China.
China Cultural Revolution.
So the American culture war, because we're going to fight back, obviously, and not allow that stuff to happen. There I go, full microphone boy, right? When do you think that started?
Oh, I think it's been happening for decades, over a century at
Over
this
a
point,
century?
because the early 1900s. I look at history as a very small timeline, especially America's history, and when you look at the rumblings of what happened in the early 1900s where the communists were rising up. I love this book, Age of Entitlement, by Christopher Caldwell, and it talks about one of the biggest problems we faced was with the defeat of the USSR under Reagan. We elected Reagan. He has all these great political promises and stuff, and we still quote him today. And we felt like we had won a victory because he cut taxes. The policies of welfare, the welfare policies that were passed in the 60s, 70s, he campaigned on ending them. He didn't end them. He continued to fund them and bolster them, and then also cut taxes. And so we created this unsustainable idea that we could have this massive amount of a welfare system and then have low taxes. And then he was in office. What Caldwell says is, listen, once Reagan was out of office, it was like he was never there. The left barreled through their policies. We never stopped them, and now look at the shape of the country, the amount of debt that we have. The other thing was that because we won that war, Cold War against the USSR, we thought we'd defeated communism, when in reality the USSR itself collapsed, but the communists inside of America were more stronger than they had ever been. And we felt like we had achieved that victory and that it was no longer an issue. That's why my biggest problem when I'm in the conservative movement stuff, when I try and have calls with that establishment group, all the groups like that, they used to dismiss education for the longest time. And they would say, Morgan, it's just not smart for us to put our resources into lobbying for education reform. We care about economics. And I would say, this is about educating people on economics and the history of economics. And if we don't have people that are smart enough to know the basics of economics, we will see the destruction of the country because we elect people with dangerous economic policies. Do you not see the connection there? And so that's the wall that I have been hitting for a very long time, Cade. And it shows the people with that mentality from the late 1900s that are still in power, still in office, or still in charge of these organizations with all this money, they have an archaic view of American politics. And that's why we're seeing the rise of the culture war, because we're finally understanding how important it is and how dangerous it was for us to let go of culture, let go of education of our children, and trust the government with things like approving ingredients and the things that we're eating, approving the education, and teaching our children to be good citizens. All of this stuff, I would say our parents' generation and the earlier generation, they were like, well, why would the government not do what's best for our kids?
Right.
You know, to me, I have complete distrust, and I think we need to take power back from them in all aspects, from lifestyle to culture to education.
Well, it's, you bring up a really good point with like that Reagan era, because like, even not even just fiscally, but when you look at culturally what was happening at the same time.
Yeah.
You were watching Sylvester Stallone beat up oh man, what's his name? I love him. Dolph Lundgren. Oh, what a beautiful man.
Yeah, that was a good movie.
Phenomenal movie. And you're watching it and you're just like, oh,
yeah.
Like I'm so glad to be American,
yeah.
man. I'm like, oh, I want to go punch a Russian.
Well,
like,
Cade, that's why you have to read the book, and I encourage everyone to, Age of Entitlement, because it really is a slap to the face that's needed of the fact that we have allowed ourselves to get these little wins as our country is being destroyed. We're like, Rocky beat the communists. And
Top Gun.
Yeah, all this stuff, and we're like, yeah. But in reality, it's like, oh, we've lost all of these battles.
Wait, that was completely fictional and not a real win.
We've allowed them to propagandize so much, and then in our heads we feel like we've won. I mean, you still see, when I see people quote Reagan now, I'm like, we are lost, because it was such, and we see this with Trump too, all the work that he did. He didn't go far enough, if you ask me, and now he's not been in office for how many years? 2, and it's like his entire the entire list of achievements that he achieved for the country gone. It's like he was never there.
Yeah. Well, it's hard when, it's like he was. I mean, there's so many things I could say about that last administration, good and bad. It was just a whole thing.
Walk the line here.
But you're really, you were really fighting a war on two fronts. You had, it's almost quite literal, not really literally, but there was the media side of things, also the policy side of things, and there was a lot of.
Well, and that's what we're running into. I think for the first time, he was one of the people that we could trust to actually have policy, which was good. Mm-hmm. But some criticism is that he didn't go far enough. I mean, a lot of stuff wasn't fixed. The education system. Betsy DeVos is coming out with a new book that I can't wait to read, but it's her 5 pillars for what we can do to fix education in the country. And she has to address, I was put in charge of the Department of Education. We said we were going to end these things. We said we were going to take an axe to it. We were going to really make some radical changes for the future of the country, and they didn't. And so she addresses that. She's now calling for the ending of the DOE. So that kind of stuff, it's like, well, maybe we do need to come up with solid platform goals instead of values. And so, again, to the Age of Entitlement, one of the criticisms of our movement that we have to understand is we are all about values. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to policy, we continually lose. And then we just say, well, as long as we kept our values and as long as we conserve, what are we conserving? We need to be active in the conservation of our values and of the country, not just of our values, but of the structure of this country. And I think it's really exciting because I would say most people are in line with us on this kind of stuff. So it's not like a doomsday thing. It's just that we have people that haven't seen the light yet, and we got to reach them.
Well, it's so weird because, especially here in Arizona, and the world that I've been in the last 25 years, I don't want to say I've been in a bubble, like a conservative bubble, but I mean, I kind of have been. Growing up in Arizona, being in the military, or I served my mission in Idaho, which is about as based as it gets.
I love Idaho.
Oh my God. Have you been up there?
No. I just look at pictures all the time and go,
That's where you need a homestead.
See, I've talked to you about this, though. The 7% thing freaks me out. I want to do warm weather now. I guess I should provide context to everybody listening. There's a statistic that says Americans spend an average of 7% of their lives outside. And I am so steadfast in my goal of creating a homestead environment for my children where I'm homeschooling them. I have on the property all of the production equipment, like a little studio that I need for all the educational curriculum that I make for my nonprofit, for my show, all that stuff. That's on the property as well. And then it's an immersive experience for the whole family. Like, it is an environment of learning and of growth for all the kids, every member of the family. And I want that so bad. And I always thought that it would be up in the mountains because I'm from the Adirondacks. And when I saw that 7% statistic, and when I see Ballerina Farm, I love them so much. But the problem is it looks freezing out there when she's going every night to milk her cow in the winter. And I just wonder, perhaps I want a more lush and fertile and warm environment and climate for what I envision, so that my kids can be outside a majority of the year. And then maybe they're inside for that one hot month in the summer because it is going to get a little hotter when you're in the South. So that's why I'm less and less looking at Utah, Montana, Idaho like I was for a long time, and now I'm trying to scout a place in Texas, southeast area where it's really fertile. I can have plenty of food grown on the property, and then it's really enjoyable for the kids to be outside barefoot running around a majority of the year. That's kind of the goal and my vision now. No.
Yes.
It's so cold there.
No, it's not.
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding at all.
Okay, if you can come up with a list of potential towns, I'd take you seriously.
Well, it depends on the towns, because there's places like Emmett, Idaho, which is literally one of the most beautiful valleys you'll ever see. And it's just north of Boise and Meridian, and it drops down into this valley. So you have like this high desert kind of plains looking area, and then it drops down into this valley, and it's just cherry trees for miles and orchards and huge farms. And it's so beautiful. And it's got this super amazing, like, small red brick
climate?
town. So it gets about like the coldest I ever saw was about 20 degrees in the dead of winter. Usually like mid to high 20s.
That sounds kind of nice.
For
I'll
about
consider.
6 weeks. But the only thing with Emmett is it is literally filled with the weirdest people you'll ever meet in your life.
Oh, that's fine. I'm weird. I'm super awkward.
Like, you'll meet a person and you're like, that's the weirdest person I've ever met in my life. That's crazy. I can't believe that I met the weirdest person in Emmett, Idaho. And then you meet the next person.
Really?
And they're just as weird.
See, that's what I think people probably experience after talking to me, so I think it's fine. I'll be with random people and I'm like, yeah, so did you know this about birth control? It's like, and they're like, what? When I meet a young person, oh my gosh, it's really strange, Cade. And they're like doing the jewel thing. Have I talked to you about that?
The jewel thing?
I'm trying to hang out with younger people. And what I've discovered in my 3-month stint of hanging out with younger people is that they all... This is the thing. I'm like, listen, if there's oxybenzone in your sunscreen, you need to get rid of that thing immediately. No artificial flavors. No artificial fragrance. I'm trying to alert everybody. I'm like, get off birth control, women. I'm trying to help everybody detox because, first of all, women out there, you cannot detox once you're pregnant. You can detox before you're pregnant and get a lot out of this, but you cannot detox once you're pregnant. It's too dangerous for the baby because you have to get them nutrients. The problem is if you don't detox in time, your baby will get that toxic stuff that's in your body from all of the chemicals that we're surrounded by that's approved by the FDA. It goes through your placenta and into your baby. I am obsessed. So I think everybody else must also care about these things too, right, Cade? No. So now that I'm hanging out with young people, I'm like, how am I going to radicalize them to also get rid of all the things in their home that are disgusting for them? And then I see them all just holding these little pastel-colored boxes that they smoke vape from. How am I supposed to reach them when they are still breathing in seed oil?
It's all seed oil, too.
It's seed oil. And so then they don't even know what seed oil is. So I have so much to do,
I'm a
as
seed
you can
oil
see.
disrespecter myself.
That's really good. But, you know, it makes it hard for me to socialize because I'm just like, what are you doing there?
Like,
like, what's up? They all have this little like technique of like sneakily doing it, and it's like, hello.
Doing the fist, like,
and they all have one. I didn't realize. That's how out of touch I am. I didn't realize that basically all young people own one.
I thought about buying a bunch for a time.
Them.
I thought about buying like a crate of them to sell them to all my buddies who need them.
Absolutely not.
What I love is they're like, oh, it's not addictive. Like, yeah, it's got nicotine in it, but it's like...
No.
And have you ever seen someone without their vape? They lose their mind.
Yeah, I was talking to someone that said his ex-girlfriend was... like everything, they were always late to things, and because she would run out of her packet, I don't even know what they're called, the little juice things, and then have to go and replenish them at the store, and she could not go to the event until they went and got the refill thing. And it's just like, what kind of lifestyle is that? We need to save these young people. And
just
once I saw that, I
like
said, wow. So I feel like at the zoo, like when I'm just staring, I'm like, whoa, why is everybody holding this contraption? I'm gonna like confiscate them or something.
real Ron Swanson vibes at the Whole Foods store.
It shows people
amazing.
don't care enough about themselves. But how can we expect them to care about the future of the country if they can't care about what's going in their bodies and the future that their own individual self and family will have? Like, if we were more intentional about the actions that we took and not so short-sighted, and we didn't think so flippantly about the things that we're consuming, whether it's media or actual ingredients, I think we would all be better off. We'd all be healthier. We'd all be mentally healthier, and we'd be stronger for our families and then communities. This all goes back to individuals, and it's such a good, maybe it's a stretch for me to say it, but I see that as what we fall victim to being obsessed with breathing in fruit juice with seed oil mixed in it and nicotine, Why would we need to add that to our lives?
Well,
Sorry, I could go on about this, but I'll stop myself.
Likewise. I mean, that's the point of the podcast, right?
Yeah, but like parents, I don't know if parents don't know this, but like every young person that I've seen now that I'm trying to hang out with them more, I'm shocked by this.
Yeah, I mean, I won't say stop hanging out with them because they need your influence. They need your influence, Morgan.
But it's fascinating.
I'm less fascinated by it and more just like cringed
Well,
by
it's
it.
like the mask thing. It's like It's almost like we're all little sheep. I was on a Brass and Unity yesterday, and we were talking about how the only reason the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and all these globalists get together at a meeting every year and literally say we're going to bring world domination and these people are going to own nothing by 2030 and they're going to eat their bugs and they don't need a house. They can live in these little shacks. All this stuff is only possible, and they talk about us like we're ants because we allow them to consider us ants and treat us like ants. We act like ants. We act in uniform with whatever they expect. And we are easily manipulated. That's the problem. And so if we just step out of that little comfort zone and take more control of ourselves and our bodies, I think would be a lot better.
Well, I've always said, people talk about the minority group. There's minority, like, oh, we're so oppressed. We're minority this, minority that, breakfast tacos, Jill Biden, whatever. There's only one minority in the United States of America, and that is the individual.
Oh. Well, it's like family being the smallest unit of government.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. And people are all, and you have both ends of the spectrum where you have people who are just like putting the blinders on. They're like, yeah, I'm going to be like, I'm just going with the flow. What can I do about it? Well, here's what you can do about it. You can listen to Morgan Zegers' podcast.
Oh, very funny.
You can listen to my podcast, and you can get the solutions to the problems, or at least you can get the tools to figure out a solution to a problem. You can do that. Or there's the other people that are the opposite way. They're like, no government, like super, like, not that it's inherently bad, but like the super libertarian mindset, anarchist mindset where they're like, no government, like get rid of all of it. And it's like, listen, bro, no matter what you reduce the man, quote Marx, the man to, the institution to, you're always going to have a level of government because people are tribal.
Yeah.
You have families. Let's say you have two different families. You're going to have someone in charge, and that person in charge working with someone else and from another family in charge.
Yeah.
That,
well, it's like
cooperation is
people that
government.
say that kind of stuff. They're like, oh, well, I believe in anarchy because I don't like government. It's like, oh no, you're just creating a vacuum where somebody really bad will rise up. So that's the whole point: is try and create a government that's good and limited in power as much as you can to avoid these problems. I've heard it. So I was talking to somebody and they were talking about the war stuff in Ukraine and Russia, and they were going on a rant. I get it; it's ridiculous to see the amount of money that's being sent over there, and the industrial complex with the military is insane as well. But he was saying, like, why should we care what's happening on the other side of the world? And he was just so casually dismissing it. And he's like, I don't like any war. I don't care if people are killing people over there, if they're killing kids or whatever they're doing. Why do I need to step in? And we forget that sometimes it's like there's evil people out there in the world that want to kill us. Somebody was like, why do I care what China does? Like, they aren't interested in us. No, China hates us, and there's people out there that want us dead. They want to conquer, because that was human history, conquering land and people and controlling them. And we are so privileged now that we don't even have that thought in our head of like, well, why would they want to do that to us?
Yeah. It's like, why do I need a gun?
Everything's
The police
so
will
good
save
right now.
me.
There's borders. Why would people disrupt sovereign countries? That's what happens with humans. They do it all the time. Like, people are so confused about Ukraine and Russia. It's like, yeah, that's the whole point. People like to conquer other people. Mm-hmm. Countries like to conquer countries.
Well, I mean, that's just going to turn into a whole another Mujahideen situation over there. But
oh my gosh, it'd be a mess. Want to know what's interesting though? Speaking of China, did you hear what happened in Grand Forks with more land going to communist China? So I like to give solutions to people. I like to just give people things that they can do. And yesterday I was like, everybody better contact the mayor's office of Grand Forks, North Dakota, because China buys a lot of influence with politicians. So this could be a situation of China either is blackmailing him or has a ton of money that they're giving to him or his family in some way. They could be doing that. And he could be stuck in a situation like that. They call it elite capture. I don't know if you've heard of that. But the mayor of Grand Forks was in hot water because it's now a national news story of a potential national security threat of 12 miles from Grand Forks Air Force Base, farmland was just sold to a Chinese communist company that will be using it for agricultural purposes. But if you're that close to an Air Force base, experts are saying then you could track everything that's going in and out of that thing, and it's very, very dangerous. Why was this approved? The mayor of the town, Cade, said, well, it's going to be really good for economic development of our town. And then he said, I'm entering this in good faith. With what? The CCP? The genocidal CCP? The Biden administration. I disagree with them on most things, but even they are saying that the CCP is committing genocide right now. They've killed almost 100 million people over the last 100 years, the CCP.
Oh, 100 years. I was going to say like this year, right?
Over the last 100 years, they have killed dozens, tens of millions of people, and now they have concentration camps and commit genocide. And we have a mayor 12 miles away from an Air Force base allowing land to be purchased by the CCP and tells the media it'll be good economic development for the town. I'm going to enter this in good faith. So I tell everybody, email this man immediately. Like, speak out about this because it's just going under the radar. I searched his name on Twitter. I searched the thing on Twitter last night. 3 tweets about it. Super casual. And so that's the thing. I don't know if maybe they bought his influence because they do that, or maybe this guy is just so narrow-minded and only focused on the success of his town with selling a small parcel of land in the big picture of it all for good economic development for the town, but he's putting national security at risk and in general compromising all core American values to allow the CCP to own more farmland in America. It's like, what a problem is that?
Well, what Americans need to do is, you've heard of Johnny Appleseed, right?
The original story?
Like the original story of Johnny Appleseed?
Of chopping down the tree?
Chopping down the tree.
Oh, no. Oh, he
Johnny
went.
Appleseed.
Oh, I'm confusing Abe Lincoln chopping the cherry tree down.
No.
Okay, yes, Johnny Appleseed.
That wasn't Abe Lincoln. That was George Washington who chopped down the cherry tree.
Oh, how can I even call myself a history nerd
if
I don't know these
nerd?
things?
Come on, Morgan. No, so Johnny Appleseed, he went ahead of all the people trekking out west, and he would plant apple trees.
Oh, he's a colonizer.
And then when all the people were coming out west, they had apple trees that were producing fruit, and it was a huge benefit to all those people coming across. China does this. They're the bad. They're like the anti-version of this. But what China does, like if you look at Taiwan, China's already taken over Taiwan. Did you know that?
Well,
did you know that?
It's bound to happen.
No, they've already done it.
What do you mean?
So what China does is, and they're very smart with this, every decision that they make today is for 50 years in the future.
Yeah.
And so that's financially, that is like who they're going to kill. Like they've already got mapped out, planned out. They say, you will be doctor, right? And like, so this is what's happening in Taiwan right now because they want it. They want to make Taiwan Taipei, right? They have sent Chinese nationals into Taiwan with Chinese CCP money, and they're buying up all the real estate. So there's huge areas where it's all Chinese nationals just buying up real estate out of nowhere. And all it takes is for them to say, okay, well, if you're a Chinese national anywhere, all your property is China's property. And when Chinese national own 90% of that island,
that's smart.
Then it's like, okay, well, we own it.
Yeah.
And they're just, planting seeds right now. They're just putting people in place.
That's very interesting. They're Johnny Appleseeding.
They're Johnny Appleseeding.
I just read an article about, I can't believe I forgot this, of Native American stuff and how Johnny Appleseed was like the most evil villain ever for planting his apple seeds.
Well, what we need to do is figure out a way, Morgan, to Johnny Appleseed culturally in America.
Cade.
How do we...
It's a perfect term.
Because every decision that they've made, like all the cultural stuff being pushed over here, like LeBron James and John Cena and like all these celebrities and cultural icons.
Yeah.
Guess whose dime they're on?
Yeah, elite capture.
Yeah.
All of our celebrities and politicians and everything. Okay, Johnny Appleseeding. I like this. We will think on it.
We need
no good plan comes quickly. Rome wasn't built in a day.
The Johnny Appleseed.
This is generational. Well, this is... Kate, I think this is generational. So maybe this is the Johnny Appleseeding. I'm trying not to be inappropriate here. Procreation is the Johnny Appleseeding. Because if you are fruitful and multiply all the little seeds, Johnny Apple seeds, I'm not describing this well, but I always really do think that generationally, if we have our generation of parents, when we are parents, we properly raise kids, not the way Gen X did, and then we have another generation and another, like, that is a massive amount of people, enough people to bring positive change, I would think. So that's one form of Johnny Apple seeding.
But likewise, it can go the other way.
Well, yeah, but they're not procreating in a good way.
No, but they are influencing youth in a way to where 1 to 2 generations away, it's like...
That's why that whole system has to go down. The education system has to go down. And I wonder the numbers game. This is a numbers game. First of all, you don't need... My favorite political approach is that you don't need a majority to win. It's all about a strong enough minority to control things.
As we can see with, like LGBT stuff going on.
You just need a powerful enough minority. That's what the founders, the whole Constitution, it's structured around protecting the minority, because majority oppression can really happen quick. A bunch of ignorant people that join in, and that's what we're seeing now, I would say, with like 55% of people would support vaccine mandates and all this crazy stuff. But it's kind of a numbers game of how many conservative, middle of the road, just good-hearted Americans can we build versus how many are they going with their systems, are they going to corrupt and grab to their sides. But that's the thing, we're seeing that change of parents starting to understand what's happening to their kids, and they aren't just happily sending their kid on a yellow school bus to school every day thinking that they're going to become a good citizen by the time they turn 18 when they graduate. Now we understand there's a different role for families and that we need to take that power back. So I'm wondering what the numbers game would look like, but we'll have to see.
Who said it? I can't remember. I want to say Jocko Willink or somebody, but there's always going to be a hard decision. Like, there is always going to be pain involved with every decision that you make. There's either the pain of discipline or the pain of consequence. And in this modern Johnny Apple seeding that we need to do, I think it really comes down to what decisions do we make today that we will see no fruit from. But 2 generations away, there's going to be apples for our...
Yeah. Well, did I tell you that? That's one of my favorite quotes is a country succeeds or a society succeeds when men plant the seeds for trees that they will not sit under in the shade of. And so, do you know... What's sad is most people don't think like that anymore. But generational family is something that I think we should bring back. I would say pop culture and movies and TV and music, it's all normalized. Like the concept of a Sweet 16? Nobody actually has those.
No.
But movies and television shows and everything make us seem like, oh, that's what everybody's doing. And all these big lavish weddings and all this stuff. It's just kind of like created a culture and an expectation of what things look like. Same thing with that, oh, I've got to get out of this small town. I've got to go to the city. My stupid parents and this small country town. I think that is literally a part of the cultural revolution that the left is trying to push onto us, of eliminating pride in where you came from, pride in being from a small area, pride in staying near your family where they are. I struggled with that because I really believe in not leaving generations of family and just going wherever you want. But my family is in communist New York State, and so their goal has been for a while to leave. And so that's why I felt comfortable enough to leave too, because I know that they're all going to leave and we'll figure out a new place. But traditionally, media and pop culture is pushing onto us the concept of just abandoning family, and that it's really only there as your annoying parents when you're a kid, and then you can't wait to get out of the house and break free and go live it up. What does that even mean? A lot of it is such a scam that they've told us. It's
such a scam. I mean, what really makes me laugh is especially, people who, the very, very extreme animal rights activists and vegans are a big part of this, where they see bees, like beekeeping. They're like, that's so unethical. You're going to put all those bees in those sheets and they're just going to make honey like that for you. And it's like, bro, you live in an apartment in New York City stacked on top of 8 million other people or 12 million other people, and you're making honey for someone else. You think you're any different than those bees? You think that's any less or more ethical? Like, go drink bleach with that kind of thinking, bro, because you're wrong.
Well, I think it's always so interesting because my family lives on a mountain about an hour from the nearest Target it's like 25 minutes to the nearest large grocery store. You know what I mean? Like, they live in a rural area. There's more cows than people in the county.
Excellent.
And I'm proud of that. I love it so much. And they live in this cabin on this cute little mountain all the way up. So I always wonder, like, if doomsday, I need a horse or something to get up and down. That's why I ride horses. I don't know if you knew that, because I'm like, I need a mode of transportation when things go to crap. It's not the, like, oh, I like riding horses.
You don't trust your Lamborghinis?
No, I don't trust I mean, long distances. If you think about it, of like, everybody used to know how to do that stuff. Everybody used to know how to ride a horse and to travel. That's how they traveled distances. And now we could never. And so what happened if a car is not a possible thing? I read 1 second after the book where they have the EMP, electromagnetic pulse, and that blew my mind. That's when I became a homesteader in 2020. I don't know if you knew it. When COVID first hit, I read 1 second after, and it's a book of, like, an electromagnetic pulse hits America, and it shows from the first 5 minutes to 10 minutes to an hour, a day, a year. It's crazy, and it's very accurate. Even Newt Gingrich was like, this is a very serious threat, and this is a very accurate book of what would take place. And it shows, first of all, one of the big things is the status of women. Like, we are so luxurious in our country right now, where I'm equal to you in all aspects, but you could beat me up if you must. Like, a man could seriously hurt a woman. He is naturally stronger. He is more focused with logic. A woman's more focused with her emotions and compassion, and she's more nurturing because she's supposed to raise the children. We have our natural primal differences, and people forget those. And so what shows with an electromagnetic pulse coming and all electricity disappearing in the country, no cars working or anything, women were immediately sent back to being a lower class or a lower status because they needed protection.
Yeah.
And they were being attacked. And so they needed to find men that would protect them. It was fascinating to see, because this is not just like after 2 years, people started to have to form tribes. This happens within a decade. The women immediately go back, and it's like, wow, we really need to check ourselves sometimes about how privileged we are to be able to have this kind of luxury of equality and freedom. But I became a homesteader because I read that book, and then I started making a little Pinterest page of, like, what I would do when the world goes to crap. And this was early COVID. But it really is enjoyable. And I get frustrated because I've been in this country girl mentality for years. Like I said, my parents are on this mountain, and it's what I'm used to. And then you see people like AOC that say, we hate the environment. It's like, you and I are outdoors more in a week than she is in an entire year.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hike every morning. I run outside every morning. My family grows their food. We live amongst nature every single day, and our hobbies are in nature. Our food comes often from what we grow ourselves. And then these city people have actually successfully marketed the Green New Deal against country people, ranchers, farmers, and just in general people that live in rural areas, as if we're bad for the environment. And that if we don't support their Marxist, socialist economic plan in the Green New Deal, the world will end in 10 years. None of that actually makes sense when you look at it and are the differences in our individual lifestyles.
Well, I just want to give a big shout out to Al Gore for starting all that nonsense. I mean, he really just knocked it out of the park with that one. That was just a slam dunk on the whole global warming thing.
Well, it's not even that. It used to be global cooling. They've had, even before Al Gore, instance after instance of these alarmist views that they said in 10 years this is going to happen, and then it doesn't happen, and then they have a new alarm sound for whatever the next crisis is going to be. What's interesting, my speechwriter, have I ever told you this? My speechwriter in college, speechwriting professor, he was the speechwriter for Al Gore when he was vice president and running for president. So very liberal. I went to a very liberal school in D.C. I thought I was going to go into veterans advocacy after, so I wanted to do it in our nation's capital and get my degree in comms and legislation and stuff. And Al Gore's speechwriter, who was my professor, I won this contest in the class on a speech asking people to donate to Saratoga Warhorse. And my speech, I should probably add more context. It was a competition where we all had to write a speech asking for donations to our nonprofit. All the students had to donate $10 to a pool, and then the winner would get that money for their nonprofit. So I did it to Saratoga Warhorse, and I did a speech to the kids about how you guys burned the American flag when Trump won just last year, and I see you out there every single weekend crying about the next big problem, and you're screaming about our government, about politicians, about election results, and you are only able to do that because of the country that we live in, because of the rights that we have that were fought for and protected by veterans. You owe them a thank you so that you can do things like burn that flag that I saw you do. It was disgusting what you did, but you can at least do it here. You'd have your head chopped off in other countries. So I won. And I won the speech thing, and he came up to me after, and he was like, Morgan, you're really good at this. You're good at the speech writing thing, but you just really need to sound more intelligent when you're talking. And I was like, what? And he was like, you need to sound more articulate. Do you get what I'm saying? And I was like, kind of. And now I get what he's saying. Now I understand. It's all this liberal elitism. That's how they think things should go. And I think people like you and me, we're in the conservative side of politics, and we're doing pretty good at it because we talk like normal people, and we reach people on an average level because we're just average people, and we're not talking like uppity Washington, D.C. speech writing Al Gore types that are thriving in their higher-than-thou perspectives.
Well, I mean, you can tell from the calluses on my knuckles dragging behind me everywhere that I might be a little under than average, but...
Oh, stop that. That's funny. But yeah, it was such a weird example, but it does ring true for their mentality that they have of, you must sound like an intellectual with your speeches. But now I'm a public speaker, and I'm just like, hey, everybody!
I'm Morgan.
How's it going?
So what are you doing? I mean, you're obviously working on your homestead.
Yes.
You're working that's
I'm
like
just gonna breathe.
Here, there's an air vent right over there, and you just like dip your head over it. So homestead is the
Game plan.
That's your eye. That's
yeah.
the prize your eye's on. What do people need to do to kind of capture that vision, do you think?
Oh, for themselves?
Like
well, they
young
have to
people.
want it first. They
You
have
gotta
to
want it.
understand the importance of it. Everybody's so dependent. I run a nonprofit called Young Americans Against Socialism. It's very literal because first of all, it's great for marketing. It makes it very clear what we're about. Donors
I
are
love
like
the acronym.
nice. Oh, I hate it.
Yes.
Don't even. This is how boomer I am. Didn't even cross my mind as I was creating it. To me, it's like I just want it to be literal, and then our show is called The Freedom Record, so I like the show name a lot more. But for structural purposes, it makes it very easy for us. And I am against socialism because socialism is an economic system where the government provides everything. And when you are not able to provide things for yourself to get by, your food, taking care of yourself, specifically with healthcare, is a really dangerous thing. But your pay, all of these things, when you're reliant on a government to get by with the most crucial things of your day-to-day life, they will then say, you won't get these things unless you comply with XYZ. And so that's what we see in socialist countries. That's why some of them call themselves democracies. They say they have elections. In reality, it's all watched, and you are expected to show up, and they will monitor who you vote for. They will monitor your attendance. They will track you in every way. And if you don't do what they expect of you, you will not get your food. You will not get your health care. You will not get your pension. You will not get your job. And you will die. It's a very aggressive form. And so it's all about control. People think every tax, every regulation is socialism, and it's really confusing when we do that. We need to be understanding of socialism is when the government takes over the means of production of major industries. And it's very, very dangerous because it gives them all the control. That's why Lenin said socialism is the required step, that main step to communism. Because once you control money and resources, you control pretty much everything in someone's life. You can control the whole population. And so I see that as control. And the threat of control, not just with government, but of major corporations and global supply chains, we've seen how dangerous that is. And we are really one of the first generations in human history to not have ancestral skills, to not have the skills that we would need to get by. We can't even read a map these days. And so I find it very valuable, not only for myself, but like I said, I want to build an environment for my family and my kids where it's just natural to us to have all of these skills, to be able to provide most things for ourselves. I'm not saying I'm going to be an expert. I'll probably still go to the grocery store and pick up things when I want to because we live in a luxurious time where we can do that. But I want to equip them with everything that they need. And until you appreciate the value of something like that and the concern that is very serious and going to become more prominent as the years go by, I think, in the country, until you see that yourself, then you're not going to want to have that lifestyle to begin with. Maybe you'll want to have a hobby farm for funsies because you just like being a country bumpkin. But I truly do it because I am concerned and I want my family to be prepared. I think that everybody should be taking that mindset too. But it is really fun, and there's a lot of people out there that actually do this as well. So it's nice to know that I don't think I'm crazy at all or anything. I think this is a very logical step to be making and to get back to the basics. One of the cool numbers is that, have you heard the Victory Garden statistics from World War II? 40% of food was grown in backyards.
Yes, I have heard that statistic.
And my dad, we've always had a Victory Garden in my family's house. And so just carrying on those traditions and keeping in touch with primal and ancestral things and skills and passing down skills from generation to generation, I think is going to get this country in a better place for sure. Because even conservatives, I'm sure you've seen conservatives where, they're conservative or they're Republican, but they are just as dependent and just as brainwashed in many ways into complying to everything that the status quo is expecting of us. It's kind of dangerous.
Well, it kind of frustrates me when I see all these people, like, you kind of have this, you saw the writing on the wall. You had this like, oh wait, I am understanding like this could happen. You read that book and you're like, oh shoot, this is a real threat. And some people it takes just a brick to the face of experience to really see that. And I think I kind of, I've always kind of been like outdoorsy, but for me it was really, I think we were doing some kind of training where it was like all on us. Or, you know what it was for me? What that really did it was I went to Special Forces selection, and I didn't make it. But that's just such a you're turning the volume of life up to 11 and experiences like that. And when you realize it's all on you, when you have an experience when you realize no one is coming to save me, this is it. I am my first and last and only line of defense and security and provisions, that's it. When you have an experience where when you realize you messed up and you feel the consequences of not being prepared, experience is always the best teacher. Yeah. And it's so frustrating too, especially given my current state of affairs as a single man in this arena. We'll call it an arena.
An arena. Love is a battlefield.
It is a battlefield. But I'm how is warlord potential not a legitimate dating criteria?
Yeah. Oh, it is.
It is?
Well, for the people that believe in that stuff, you can't make people want to do it. Well, I think that's also why, have you noticed the celebrity crushes of the day? People used to look at Patrick Swayze and be like, oh my gosh, he's so hot. Swayze. And now it's like Harry Styles, who looks like a female. He has thinner legs than my forearm. And so I see that and I'm like, or like Timothy Chalamet. They look like little boys that are prepubescent. And I wonder, do the young girls actually get physically attracted to him? Or are they just told that this is the hot guy of the moment and then they fall in love with him in that way? Because you see how girls react to Justin Bieber, who looks more manly now, but Timothy Chalamet and Harry Styles, they look very feminine and prepubescent as males. And so I always wonder, there's something weird about that. Maybe it's because we have settled in to not expecting a man to have defensive primal skills. I was thinking earlier, when you had things in life just a few hundred years ago, or just 100 years ago even, late 1800s even, you had to be able to physically protect those things. If you're going to homestead out west in the original, the Homestead Act of 1862 or 65, you had to then be able to protect your home, the babies that you have in that home, the physical property. Because if you were a cowboy and you wanted that building, you could go in and just kill whoever's in there, and then it's your property now. That's how things operated. And now I think maybe we're attracted to these weird feminine men because we don't primally feel the need to have a protector. Not me. I don't mean to say we, but a lot of girls that I see these days.
Well, it's interesting.
Kind of fascinating.
I saw a study done, and this is to your birth control rant. Oh yeah. You can add this in there. But I figured this out when I was going out with this girl who kept flip-flopping on, one day she'd be hot, one day she'd be cold, and I'd be like, dude, what is going on? I thought you liked me, and then the next day she's talking. It was so stressful. But apparently when women go on birth control, it changes like who they're like what they're attracted
well,
to.
yeah, it messes with your hormones.
It messes with their hormones in a way where they're like, you know that little skinny little torpy guy, no warlord potential. Yeah, I like him now. I'm gonna, I don't need.
That's funny.
I don't need
Alex Clark
the Chad
has that.
over here.
She did an episode on the spillover about birth control, and one of the things that the doctor or the expert had said is that what attracts a man and a woman together is often just scent, or not often just scent, but it's often a part of attraction. And so birth control messes with your hormones and changes what kind of scent you're attracted to.
Interesting.
Isn't that fascinating? I love hearing that kind of science, but yeah, I mean, for the birth control stuff, it's really tragic because girls my age, we were all in a situation of, you go to the doctor when you're like 13, 14, and they say, oh, you have cramps, or oh, you have pimples, or you have headaches when you get your period, because yeah, you're losing blood. That would make sense. You have those things, don't worry. If you take a birth control pill every single night for the rest of your life until your time is ready to have a baby, then you'll just be fine and your symptoms won't be so bad. You won't get those cramps. And our parents were all like, oh, thanks, that's a good idea. Like, nobody was like, wow, maybe the system is not good here.
Yeah.
Maybe there's big pharma. Nobody was listening to this kind of stuff at the moment. And so they were like, sure, let's take 3 Gardasil shots. Let's put them on birth control. All these things. So 14-year-old girls that maybe had extra cramps were going to start taking hormone changing pills every single night until what? They're 27 and married and they want to have a baby now. And then all of a sudden, 1, the system is just so messed up that they're struggling. Or 2, those symptoms that they started taking birth control for in the first place, the heavy cramps or the heavy bleeding or all those things, it's actually because they had fertility issues. And they had PCOS or endometriosis. And the doctor was just like, don't worry, it's just extra symptoms. Go on birth control, you'll be fine. And then that whole 10-year span where they could have been solving that problem and becoming aware of their body and their fertility issues, now they don't know. They get off the pill. They try and get pregnant that year once they're married. And turns out they have serious fertility issues. So it's tragic. And we have never seen this level of infertility in history.
Well, that's exactly a case that we were talking about earlier of Johnny Appleseeding, right? Because what has that led to?
They're anti-Johnny Appleseeding us.
They're anti-Johnny Appleseeding us. And they're Johnny Appleseeding themselves into okay, so we're going to give 14-year-old girls these, hormone-affecting pills and medications. Let's give 14-year-old boys the same thing, and, maybe they want to be a girl too.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very, very small jump to go from
disgusting.
what birth control is going to do to an individual's endocrine system to what puberty blockers are doing to children.
Well, and then not only that, but from birth control between puberty blockers and that stuff, all of the products that we're consuming. They're the artificial fragrances. I love this episode if anybody wants to go listen. There's an episode of The Candace Owens Show. She has Jackie Deason on from The Jackie Daily Show. And Jackie's talking about a really important study where a lot of the things that we consume, they have gender bender chemicals in them. So a lot of plastics, a lot of artificial fragrance, artificial colors maybe too. But gender bender chemicals are basically artificial estrogen. And so if you are a boy around artificial estrogen, it's really throwing you off, making you look weaker. And she said that she started looking into it when she was just casually saying, the guys don't look as masculine these days. What's going on? Like, why do they look prepubescent when they're 25? I'm 25. I'm like, I never see 25-year-olds that I'm like, ooh, nice. You know this. It's like, I've talked about it where they don't look very manly at all. And she looked into it, and they're called gender bender chemicals, artificial estrogen. So it's damaging for women to have additional estrogen. I mean, you're supposed to keep that in check. And then men to have extra estrogen makes them more feminine. But what's most dangerous is for pregnant women to be consuming these things, because pregnant women, it's going through the placenta. And a baby, when it's forming its first cells, and when it's developing its fundamental being, and it's exposed to artificial estrogen, Cade, wow. It's quite some problems. So I'm obsessed with this kind of stuff. And I think the more we care about those things, the more we're going to be able to be aware of the world around us and make smarter decisions for ourselves and our families. Because it's crazy.
So Alex Jones wasn't just right about
the
chemicals
turning the frogs are gay.
Because that is true. I did some research.
Well, so that's what's
turns
funny.
the frogs gay. But not only that, but they got bender chemicals turning the dudes gay too.
And that's so the study, they figured it out because kind of like the frogs are gay thing. That's whenever people joke about it, I'm like, oh no, it's real. And they're like, Morgan, what? So this is why I don't do well in social settings. The thing that she referenced, it was because they did a test on all these different animals. And so there was one pond that got exposed to the artificial estrogen, one wasn't. And then like the male parts were literally different on the crocodile or on the alligators that were in the bad pond. And they were more feminine. They had huge levels of estrogen levels. It was crazy. And so they tested it on amphibians or whatever. And I was like, oh, the frogs are gay. Yeah. So, yeah, he was onto something.
Do you think that there is a correlation there? Like, again, Johnny Appleseeding, because, you know, when you look back 40, 50, 60 years, dude, there was like one gay dude in a
Well, yeah, now 40%
state?
of Gen Z identifies
Are you
as
serious?
a part of... Oh, you didn't know this?
I didn't know that.
40?
You're joking.
40%
Get out of here. No way.
is a part of the LGBTQIA+.
IA plus?
I called it a mafia, and my sister, who's like, she gets her politics from TikTok, she was like, you need to stop saying that because then you scare people away. And I was like, it's a mafia. Let me tell you a little something about cultural Marxism, Taylor. We'll sit down and talk about it.
That's just so bizarre to me. Like, you know, and especially
I'll send
when
you
you
the
look
report.
at it's like, do you think it's correlated with like the obesity and the seed oils and all that stuff too?
Well, I think we're just mentally unhappy people.
You
it's
are?
such a deep... Oh, I'm not. Humans in America are right now.
Humans in America
I'm a
are.
thrillingly happy person. I would say that they're very depressed. They're struggling with mental issues. And they're just struggling with wanting to be a part of something. And it's fascinating. What's interesting, I really like this approach. Bulimia, anorexia, eating disorders used to be the thing. Mm-hmm. That was when we were kids. And that was the fad at the time. And young, impressionable minds were falling into it. And now it has become the gender spectrum. So it's no longer an issue of that. It's now the gender spectrum. And when we look more and more into it, I mean, looking at the chemicals that we're eating, how it's feminizing men, and then everything's being normalized. If you look at, I started looking at child development during the early stages of COVID when they started shutting down schools, because I don't have kids, but I love understanding family dynamic and everything. Mm-hmm. And so I really started to get into understanding development from the womb all the way up to they're 18 and then 25, because young men's brains are still forming and solidifying when they're 25. And I give you a hard time about that sometimes, but I'm just kidding, I promise. And so I looked at it, and first of all I saw, oh wow, they're not resilient. Kids are not going to bounce back from something like this, and it's sick for them to say so. It's sick for them to lie about this. But what I also saw in it was just startling information about how impressionable young people are. And they depend on adults to show them how the world works. Their mind can't comprehend a gender spectrum. If you tell them that there's 5 genders, for example, they will just say, oh, okay, there's 5 genders. Mm-hmm. And so to teach them, when they're learning the fundamentals of society, false truths, when there is a true binary objective truth that exists, it is child abuse, if you ask me, because their minds are starting to formulate what society is. That, oh, this is how it works. This is societal structure. Adults, you should not be experimenting on them by telling them things that are not true and objective and wholly factual. And that's what we're doing right now. So I'm really worried about these younger kids that are going to grow up with this normalized education, and that's why we need to care about what's being taught to kids. It's why I'm never sending my kid to public school. Kids, there's going to be lots.
Well, it's the Johnny Appleseeding. It's exactly what they're doing. And I actually watched, it's not just like informational too, but just socially as well. I watched this show this week on Netflix. I don't know how I found it.
Why do you have Netflix?
Because I'm basic.
Because you're basic?
No, this is actually, it was really funny. So it's called Snowflake Mountain, and they took a bunch of like early 20 kids, like there's like 10 of them, right? They're all in their early 20s, and they are just horrendous. You're just like, how, like you, sir, you are a proof that God exists, because if he didn't, Darwinism would have snatched you up and you would have been swallowed up into nature already. Like, that is the only reason that you are alive on this earth is because of divine intervention. That's how capable these people are. And they put them out in the woods for 2 weeks.
You're kidding.
Like, these people are,
That's
like,
quite funny.
they're like, hey, you're going to be on a reality TV show, and it's going to be in England, because they were up in the mountains of England. You're going to be on a reality TV show, so pack up, you're going to go. And they're like, oh, great, like, this is awesome. And then they show up, and they, like, blow up their luggage, and they're like, all right, here's what you got to do. You got to go get your own food.
That's so funny.
You have to use walkie-talkies.
Is it a good
use
show?
teamwork.
I've got to watch that, actually.
It's actually,
but I don't want to support the company, but that sounds interesting.
It was actually really good.
Was it making fun of them?
Yes and no.
Or is it sympathetic to them?
It was making fun of them, because you had, like, these 2 army guys that are in there. But what was amazing was how the minute they take their phones away, right? Like, they take their phones away, and all these kids are, like, just completely useless, completely helpless. But what they start doing is they build these bonds with each other. Where in, like, 2 days they're like, bro, you're, like, one of the best friends I've ever had.
Oh,
like,
that's so
oh my
sad,
gosh,
but
like,
it's true.
You're like this, like, we're like this little family out here. I'm like, bro, you've been in the woods for a week.
But that's they don't have true connection anymore.
They don't have any connection anymore.
They can't communicate. I mean, even girls my age, when they go on dates, like, men can't communicate, and they say dude and bruh in every sentence. And
That's crazy, dude.
I understand that boys have their talk, but it's just more of, it's fascinating. They talk like Gen Zers, like little Zoomers, and they're men. Or they should be men at that point. It's a little weird.
I don't like it. And it feels weird, too, because I'm very much not a part of that, and I'm sure you experience this all the time, where it's like you're trying to talk to other people, and they look at you like you have lobsters crawling out of your ears. Like, why are you saying what, those are funny words. Nobody said that since, like, the 60s. And you're like...
Yeah. Well, I know what's funny? Someone came to me with an idea. I don't know if I told you this. They wanted to do a show watching me date to set a proper example for young women of, like, what to actually ask and stuff like that. Because they were like, we need more Morgans, and we need more guys that understand what it's like to actually date as a conservative and stuff. And Kate, I don't do any productions anymore. I don't like that kind of stuff. I'll do my educational curriculum, but I like the privacy. And so I said no thank you, because I don't agree with that kind of concept fundamentally, and especially for myself. Like, I don't want to put myself out there in that way. But I think it is such an interesting thing of, like, people are so lost these days. If you look at 50% divorce rate, it's scary to people, but I'm like, you guys, it's very doable if you just have a little intention. Most people are doing it for the completely wrong reasons, or they haven't asked any fundamental questions about how do you want to parent, what do you want to achieve. Ooh. Where are we? Are we, like, at a construction site?
I guess so.
Well, it's like they don't ask, and I've asked young women too, like, do you ask these things when you're meeting someone? And they're like, no, and they've been dating for months at this point. And it's like, well, so now you're going to either have to break up when you realize you don't want any of the same things. Like, do you want to live in a suburban home, or do you want to live on a ranch out in the middle of nowhere? Do you want to have a lot of kids, or one kid, or do you not want kids at all? How do you like to discipline? Are you a liberal? Would you let a school system force a vaccine into our child that is not fully proof of its validity yet? Would you allow that just for our kid to go to public school? Can you let me homeschool? Can we send them to a charter school? All these things. No one's even thinking about it. And then we look at the 50% divorce rate and go, it's a hopeless cause anyways. Everybody just gets divorced.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe if we just asked us some smarter questions. And then I looked into it too. There was a stage evaluation done. First 2 years of a marriage, you're likely to get divorced because the guy cheats. And it's just, messy marriage, probably shouldn't happen in the first place. The guy cheats, they break up, there's infidelity. The next one is, like, you start to have kids, and guess what? You didn't ever talk about parenting, and so now you're having kids, and you're all stressed out, and you don't like each other, so you divorce. The next one is like, oh, it's just kind of a slump, and you've got young kids, and you're frustrated, and you actually don't love each other, you weren't committed to the long term. So hearing the different stages, it's like, these are all avoidable with some simple questions, but most people that I talk to maybe are the same. They have not even thought about bringing those topics up.
Oh, yeah.
So I think, like, that in itself is Johnny Appleseeding, is just letting people know there's better practices out there, there's better ways to do your life. It could cause you less harm.
So, Morgan, in all of these issues
Yes, Cade.
with the culture war, right? All the fronts of the culture war. You said this earlier. You're solutions oriented. You're out there preaching to the masses, right? What is your number one solution that a young person or even an older person, and when I say older person, I don't mean to age anybody listening to this podcast out there who may have kids or may not be, in part of this in between Gen Z millennial group, but to those listening to this podcast, your average American, what is something that they can do today to get involved and get into the combat of the culture war?
Oh gosh. Well, the first thing is everybody needs to become more aware of society and history and the historical context of what we're facing right now. And so I meet a lot of kids. This is going to be a long answer. I meet a lot of kids that are going to school for political science, and I tell them right to their face, you should change your major. It's fine to enter politics, but everything in politics, every job, it needs you to do something. You don't just get to enter and be a political science staffer, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're going to school, you should go and try and get the skill that you want to carry out in the workplace. And so if you want to make videos, if you want to be a podcast producer and sit behind this camera and then get to do all the creative editing and the posting and all the social creation for content, then you should do graphic design, you should do video editing, you should do these creative classes in college and then enter the political space. You don't have to pay for a college degree to become educated on politics. You just need to read the classics and then start reading constantly. I listen to podcasts, audiobooks, and I'm reading every single day. I read about a book a week. I'm a slower reader. Some people read even faster. But just that alone helps you become way more aware of what's going on in the world. So picking our heads up and being situationally aware of what we're actually facing is the biggest thing. Awareness and information is what we are struggling with. Most people have no idea what's actually happening. The next step of that is peer-to-peer communication. There's a study from Michigan State University, and it said the most effective way to reach a young person with an opposing viewpoint or somebody who just disagrees with you with an opposing viewpoint is actually via peer, hearing it from a person that you are friends with, not from a parent or a professor or an authority-style voice talking down at you. And so I take that not only with sharing information, because we all need to be more communicative with the people in our lives about these values and about creating a community moving forward, but also with a lifestyle. Communicating a certain lifestyle by living it out, setting an example. That's also true with our kids. Kids learn by watching and then they imitate that behavior. And so we all need to be stronger individuals so that our peers can see it, our family members can see it, and then we can have kids and pass it down to them. The next thing is education. Dismantle the current education system. The Department of Education is unconstitutional. It was never supposed to exist. It was created in the mid-1900s, and it was done so with a massive historical connection to the socialist movements of Europe. Once you start to understand that and what the people who founded it were actually saying about socializing education to be able to create one national mindset, things start to really open up to you. States and local levels are supposed to be focusing on education of children. We shouldn't be handing it off and becoming dependent on the federal government. So in my perspective, even though I don't have kids, I want to know what's being taught in my community schools. I want to know what the policies are in my state for what students have as options. Blue states are making it very hard to get your kid out of public school. They only want that to be the option. Teachers unions, the Democratic Socialists of America, and public school teachers, and everybody who supports it, the Dems, they want you to only be able to send your kid to public school. And they are making it very hard to homeschool. They're trying to shut down charter schools or at least make so many regulations that it's impossible to maintain a homeschool in your house or a homeschool pod or a charter or private school. And so they do this with regulation, with reporting requirements, all that stuff. So keeping an eye on school choice and educational freedom policies in our state and our communities is going to be really important. And then that next step is also caring about curriculum for the kids that are in public school and not just focusing on our own kids. Like, I'm going to homeschool. That doesn't mean, though, I'm going to keep my head in the sand about what the rest of the people in my community are going to be learning. They are shoving through insane curriculum. And if we as individuals remember that we're a member as ourselves, we are all members of a republic, and we're supposed to keep a republic with a federalist system where we have power at the local, state, and federal level, and we're supposed to check each other. Individuals have a powerful role in that, and we are supposed to check the system. And if we form together as community members, we can change the things like curriculum and things like school boards that are really radicalizing and indoctrinating and sexualizing our kids. This all becomes a lot more possible when people start to realize it just takes a little bit of action and a little bit of effort on their part to form together and bring this change. But we have forgotten that we have a special role in the keeping of the republic. That's what this all goes down to. I'll close it out with this, Kate, because I could go on forever. But when the vaccine mandates happened, I got so many messages, hundreds, and thousands of people were clicking on this video that I shared with a link to religious exemptions, for example. I got hundreds of messages from people saying, does this mean I need to quit my job so that I don't get the vaccine? What should I do? It was as if we have completely forgotten that, wait, we can organize. The left is so good at organizing. All it takes is for the employees who are against it at one company to try and set up a meeting or communicate with their boss and say, do you support this or do you not? We will support you if you want to stand against this. And then those businesses form together and say, okay, you guys are on the same board? Great, let's meet with our local representatives and get them on board. That's how you form a committee, an advocacy group. You then ask to meet with the state level leader. You then ask to meet with the sheriff's department of the county. You then work together and say, okay, sheriff, are you going to enforce this law? Because it's your responsibility to check an unconstitutional piece of legislation that you don't want to enforce. You have a role in the keeping of the republic too. Everybody forgot their role and the fact that you can really build from the ground up, and I think that's what needs to happen with education and with any other future unconstitutional thing that happens. But this all needs to be localized. So that's kind of what I focus on, and that's why I think family and kids and community are those most important levels, and why, as a woman, I want to prioritize my role in it. I think men need to be leading this, to be honest. People don't like me to say that, but I do think men should be leading it, and then I like to support in the ways that I can and focus on family and the home, because that's one of the most crucial parts of society. So that's just what I'm working on.
Look-y.
I'm like, oh, sorry, that was a lot.
No, that was amazing. Now, I've been asking this at the end of every podcast.
Oh.
Just because the people want to know. Not so much the people, more so just me.
The people want to know.
How do you like your steaks?
Medium rare.
Medium rare?
Just salt and pepper.
Any particular cut?
No. Actually, you want to know what? I love regular, like a regular steak on a Traeger grill. But I really like skirt steak when it's marinated in the summer. That's like a secret little thing of mine. Marinated skirt steak in the summer. And then you slice it on strips, and you just eat it with your fingers by the pool.
Oh, really? See, usually I just throw it in like a tortilla.
I've thought this through.
Usually with the skirt steak, I throw in a little tortilla action. Like I have some real good burritos
Nice.
like that.
Yeah. No, yeah, I love marinated skirt steak. It's the secret.
Well, now your secret's out. So
I'm a cheap date. What can I say?
So, Morgan, where can people go and support you?
Okay, so morganzegers.com is where I have the podcast, The Morgan Zegers Show. It's on all podcast platforms. You can subscribe 3 episodes every week. If you want to buy a flag, you can also just be at morganzegers.com. They're listed there, or zegersfreedomflags.shop. My Freedom Papers podcast with Turning Point is at tpusa.com/freedompapers. So that's a good resource for students and kids if they want to learn about the founding, and for adults that want to learn, because it's me and Connor. We're 25 and he's 26, and so we're talking about it as adults. We're not like being like, hi, kiddies.
Yeah.
It's not like that. And then my nonprofit is thefreedomrecords.com. Those are long-form interviews with survivors from communist countries. Those, I not only want people to just watch those, people that like to scroll YouTube and just kind of watch things in the background when they're working or whatever, but it's really intended also for it to be an inspiring, values-based story. It's not political. It's more of a historical story of someone's journey through an historical event, and it talks about resilience and fortitude and struggle and really coming up, and a lot of them are younger. And then they talk about their families, taking care of the younger siblings, of the feminine role they had to take in, of taking care of the kids, while the man in the situation, who was really a boy, was sent to be in the army, and it was filled with child soldiers. So hearing, especially for kids, to see that and say, wow, young people have taken up so much responsibility in other areas of the country. I really have it good here, and then be more grateful for what they have. I want families to be able to watch it after dinner and watch it on their TV. The next thing is, if any charter school people are listening, we're really trying to partner with as many homeschool pods, charter schools, private schools, and even public school teachers to have a movie day or something like that to incorporate into curriculum, because these are chock full of history, education, and they're not stories that you hear in a classic public classroom anymore in the public education system. So, Kate, I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
I appreciate you coming on. And guys, thank you for listening. If you want to support the podcast, go to fearnotdoright.com. We got merch, we got t-shirts, we got shoes. It's
shoes?
Yeah, we got shoes. Airwalk Vicks.
Oh, very nice.
My Firebird skydiving.
That's funny.
So they come in camouflage. They're all cool for skydiving. But I want to thank you guys for listening. And if you want to go follow Morgan on social media, Morgan.Zegers, right?
It is. Instagram is Morgan.Zegers.
Morgan.Zegers, Freedom Flags, Morgan Zegers Show. Morgan, once again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Cade.